G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 25th of July 2027. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of The Boyhood Arcade. All my links are in the link tree. I've also written sequel to The Boyhood Arcade, Power Games, Into the Elsbound and Erotic Tales from the Empire. Part 1 out now, so it's Part 2, Part 3 coming soon. I swear, honest, working on it. But while this war continues, I'll continue to bring you comprehensive news from both sides of the war. Because you can't make informed decisions if you don't know what is really going on. And as what is really going on is Europe using Ukraine as a proxy to destroy the Russian economy. Why? Because Europe can't compete in the arena of ideas or the economic reality. Instead of streamlining their economy, they just continue to pay themselves and their sycophants lots more money. Oh, the Europeans want to be luxurious and lying on the beaches instead of working long, hard hours in the factories. Because they seem to think that the rest of the world, they could just lock off, while the poor and desperate will work endless hours for them to get rich. But of course, the economics doesn't work that way. If more people do not earn an average wage, the bell curve for wages is rather skewed right now. You have so many lawyers, doctors, politicians, and bureaucrats earning too far on skewing the average wage. It's like the writing industry. Everyone thinks writers make lots of money. Why? Because J.K. Rowling makes lots of money. But she skewed the average wage. For the vast majority of writers make less than the living wage. And all the people who talk about living wage, and I'm not just talking about writers like myself, I'm talking about the average Hollywood writer, gets lots of money, and you want to hear about the ones who do. So, yeah. Now think of it, right? Ukraine, the average wage there is only 5,600 compared to Europe, where the average wage is well over 40 or 56,000 euro. It's like, yeah, Europe 12 times the wage of the average Ukrainian. So you can understand why they want Ukraine, right? Can you understand why they poured billions into Ukraine? To buy their loyalty, because they are not loyal people. They are not good people. When the Soviet Union fell, unlike Eastern Europe, the Russia joined Europe, they sided with China. They're only siding with you because you give them money and weapons to fight Russia, whom they hate. Why? Because Russia has oil wealth and Ukraine doesn't, because Ukraine squandered its wealth and sold off a lot of its assets. And to protect itself, Russia seized Crimea because of Ukraine's attacks on ethnic Russians, fueled by George Soros and his friend Kolominsky. Now, Kolominsky runs Ukraine like he's private little. He's one of the 9 oligarchs, and he's done his best to get rid of the others, including murder. And yet the West is like, I hear no evil, I see no evil, and will allow no one to speak of the evils of Ukraine. Now, the left will have you believe that Donald Trump's attacks on civilian infrastructure is a war crime. Well, is it really? Well, Ukraine is justifying its attacks on Russia as bringing it home. The bringing it home strategy. We're back to that now. We've gone from long-range strikes on Russian military bases to now bringing it home because they can't destroy. They can tell you they destroyed lots of Russian aircraft, but the reality is Russia has the third largest air force. And right now, they are gearing up to build 400 strike aircraft. You don't build 400 strike aircraft if you're just a limited military operation. I know. They are gearing for, and this is all over the internet, it's not just me, many people believe Europe is gearing for a war against Russia. Every day they keep talking about incursions. Russia's crossed the line. Russia's crossed the line. Russia's crossed the line. Oh, there's a drone attack, and it's always some isolated area. The reality is, it's probably a Russian spy drone, absolutely. But it was shot down over Ukraine. Now, they'll tell you it was shot down over uninhabited territory near a village in Romania. Yeah, that village is on the border, by the way. And that unmanned territory, that's the territory that Ukraine wouldn't cede to Moldavia or Romania, so that they could have a corridor so it's just a bit more corridor to the coast. Why? So they could have more oil revenue from the Black Sea. That's all. It is Romanian, was Romanian. But when the Soviet Union redrew the maps, they favoured Ukraine. Why? Because the revolutionaries came from Ukraine into Russia. Millions of them. That's how the Soviet Union was formed. Ukrainian fanatics. Now, do you see why they want Ukraine? This is like the Greece versus Turkey, right? It was a prelude to World War I. Now, had the French not declared war on Germany, there would have been the British and Greece versus the Turks. But the Turks had an alliance with Germany, so France decided to stick its beak in, and a year ahead of schedule, they declared war on Germany. Can you see the patterns if you look at what's called the Between Wars as well? Now, why are they called the Between Wars if they're the lead up to World War I? Well, before that, of course, it's the Napoleonic Wars and the French and the Spanish and all the other, right? They lumped them all into the 19th century wars. So you had the Between Wars, which were the early 20th century wars, rather than and they're always done the same thing. Now remember, Spain by the 19th century was greatly reduced. And so it was descending into the realm of warlords. And hardliners were trying to keep Spain in check. But the British and French did not want Spain to recover because it was then a threat to their economies. And they were gearing up to destroy each other. This is the problem for not the last 100 years, but for the last 450 years. This is remnants of the Roman Empire. The idea of marrying economic policy to military policy. The defense of your economy includes anything up to destroying another country. Now, Romans, the reason why you have so-called war crimes is the Romans measured economy by population. So genocide, which is actually killing up and to 10% of the population. So if you below that, you're not a criminal. You are not destroying the economic viability of the nation. If you kill over that, you're a criminal in the eyes of the Roman generals the Roman Senate, because you killed too many people. Because people was the main engine of the economy. Nothing works without people. Today, of course, we have robots and AI. So kill 20% of Ukraine? No one cares. Because that's... And believe it or not, each and every one of you can be replaced by an i7 PC with a 64 gigabit video card, a couple of very beefy hard drive towers, and that is all you need for an AI that can replace a human. Why? Well, you don't need it to have emotions. You don't need to have it walk and talk. You could cut out 90% of the human brain and have a lever puller, an AI that will pull the lever, know when to pull the lever, and know what goes wrong if the lever isn't pulled on time, and can alert when the lever doesn't work. And with that much computing power and a second CPU, and you could probably have it diagnosed and direct interfacing with the Android that would be sent to repair it. So, what is the populace going? What is the solution for the excess populace? Again, back to the Roman Empire. How did they deal? And how did China? And how did Mongolia? And how has every empire? Want to know what happened to the Hindus Empire? See, are not taught about that because they destroyed themselves in the 17th century. And India will say, in the last 100 years, we never attacked anybody. Well, go back to the Indian Empire, where you attacked all your neighbours all the time until you were defeated. India was the first nation to be defeated in Afghanistan, I believe. Yes, the Indians love to lie about their civilization. In fact, Africa is the worst for lying about their civilizations. They don't tell you about the 9 empires they've had, about the genocides they've had. Why? Because Africans' version of history is, oops, this war's over, shred it. I kid you not, they shred their history, and they do it with brutal efficiency and psychotic behavior, where they'll deny. You even see now how they deny the Rwanda genocide, and or how they like to pivot to say the Belgium genocide, and forget to tell you that it was actually the king. It was the king's cousin, who was the one who actually ordered the genocide, was an African. That the Belgian emperor had adopted. That was the tribe that the Belgians had adopted went on a killing spree. And the Belge, they didn't have a big enough army to stop them. Now, yes, you shouldn't have taken part to make sure that they didn't turn on you, and that was the problem. See, we're not taught proper history. History has been corrupted by the so-called intellectuals, the intellectual left, who want to represent everything as oppressor and oppressors. But to explain to most people that Ukraine is the oppressor, they turn around and look at Ukraine and go, you're small, Russia big. Yes, but remember, Ukraine had a compact population, whereas Russia had a spread population. And remember, even today, 90% of Russians live in sparse, right, are spread out, right? Half their population is in the Moscow region, which is smaller, right? Half of 145 million right? So let's see. Let's get this mathin, right? I should be able to do this in the head. I know that's 145 divided by 2 is 72.5 million. Smaller armies have been defeated by larger armies have before been defeated by smaller armies. Remember, the Mongols were stopped by an army of only 30,000, and they were a horde of nearly 1 million. By the time they'd reached Europe, the Greeks in Anatolia had decimated most of the, unfortunately decimated only 20% of had took a huge toll. It was the largest loss of life for the Mongols. And after the loss after several losses, the Amir's army started to disperse, and the Mongols started going back to their various territories. And remember, at that time, Turkey was seen as the oppressor, and none of the Arabs wanted to fight for them anyway. And without his enforcers, he could no longer do that. So Turkey was now in a position of maintaining its empire, much like the Romans were. So, in hundreds of years, human behavior has not changed. It has not evolved. When the left tell you to evolve, it's devolve, right? The right is evolved. The left is devolved. But because the left control debate, right? They control academia, they control debate. They sit there in their bubble and always self-congratulate. So you can't defeat them in the realm of ideas except in neutral platforms where you can compare all the actions of the left, all the actions of academia, and then you start to see the truth. And only then can you see how Ukraine is not only the oppressor, right, in the Soviet Union, the willing boot on the neck. They were the instigators of the Russian Revolution and the continuers of revolutions since. Because the ethnic Russians are so spread out. Now, why do they want to break up big nations? Because they have big potential. They have more resources per person. So their potential wealth is always greater. Now, this is to accelerate the population decline of the West, killing off the excess population so they can have their AI monsters producing goods and services for the small service class. They're going to get rid of the middle class. They're going to replace it with the service class, school teachers and bureaucrats. And then above them, you'll have the managerial class, then the elites. Amongst the service class will be the actors and actresses. They'll spread out across the various classes. You'll have the S tier. That's why you hear about the S tier. He's worth millions of dollars. No, he's not. It is the grand foolishness that you still pay millions of dollars, that you'll pay $40 for a movie ticket to sit there and watch coloured lights to get the same level of entertainment that you could off. Yes, that's why as you get older, you want to go to the movies less, because the movies no longer tickle that part of the brain with overloads of light and sound. And so the struggles of the Ukrainian feel like the perceived struggles that the left love to exploit, the working class. And so that is why Ukraine is able to get away with trying to destroy a business that was, by the way, started by a working class woman. Yeah. Wildberries was started by a working class woman. So as we look at the Ukrainian map, the Russians are hitting drone factories, but Ukraine will never admit to it or show them, because now we know why they don't show the targets, why they only show where. And I am so sick and tired of pointing out how many times, and you can go back all the way through the war, back when the media used to report, oh, this warehouse they accused of being hit by a Russian missile, turns out it was an air defense missile. They've stopped that reporting. They've stopped all pretense to. This is why it's called the access media, because they trade honesty, they trade their truth and integrity for access to other countries. See, in America, the American government is a fair target. In any other country in the world, it is not the case. In fact, in many countries, including Ukraine and Britain, by the way, you can be arrested under the Disturbing of the Peace Act for a number of offences that in America, the sheriff would probably sit down and watch. You wouldn't get arrested. In America, it's setting off fireworks to try to do that in the UK, even on Guy Fawkes Day. Ukraine, you can't criticise the government. Yeah, Russia, you can't criticise the war or certain figures. So, but Russia's not our ally, and Russia is, whereas Ukraine is supposed to be a European liberal democracy. Yeah. So, a European liberal democracy where you get arrested for criticising the government, that's fascism. Because, remember, Nazi Germany had elections. The Democratic Union of Socialist Europe will have you believe that they're the good guys. The liberal establishment is implementing fascism before our eyes, and all we can see is the youth running around screaming, oh, we're going to get free healthcare. Yeah, look at free healthcare in Canada. They put you to death if it's cost effective. That's the free healthcare you're going to get. Death. You stupid morons. You selfish morons. You're so immature and so naive. See, back in the day when I was a kid, we knew we were immature and naive. We knew there was more to learn, more to know. We didn't speak up because we believed that we had to earn our place. Now that we have, we're telling you how it is. We had no political power. The boomers. And what happened? Gen X was watching Gen Y suck up to the boomers and created the financial powerhouse that was the 90s. And we thought, well, we're going to get a nice economy out of this. We can enjoy ourselves. Nobody's stepping on us. They're leaving us alone. But then came the 2000s and the second half of the millennials, bunch of fascists. They want to defend from fascism by creating fascism. But it's not fascism when we do it. And that is exactly what it is. Liberals want to be the ones with the boot on your neck. They want to feel safe. They want to freely move around. So they don't care how many people get raped or murdered, as long as they can move freely around, as long as they can live in their little green bubbles, as long as you will sacrifice your life for them. And while you continue to pay more and more for movies and other and video games, the collapse of the video game industry is only the beginning. Only the beginning. And you miss the collapse of the books. You miss the collapse of many comics. See, the culture wars didn't start with the movies. It started with books, comic books, toys, role-playing games. Gen Z and is leading the way. It's the largest group withdrawing, right? Now you have half the millennials now withdrawing from the economy because of the greed of the early millennials because of the greed of the boomers. Overpricing, and always numbers must go up. So while America and the West has an average inflation of 4% growth, and China's growth, though phenomenal, is still second place because it's all imaginary. It's all just figment of your imagination. They make numbers up. Same with Ukraine. The Ukrainian economy is going down. They just reported a 20% drop in metal exports. They have many mines, including coal and gas, which are running at low production. Yet somehow they're claiming to still have massive growth. Now, Russia's economy, like America's, is starting to mature. It's reaching its maximum, in other words. Now, boomers, and I agree with this, there is infinite potential, but you cannot have infinite growth unless you develop that potential. Whereas the boomer mentality is numbers must go up. There is a difference between a mature, I don't care if he's 80 years old and an economist with a PhD. Boomer economics does not work. It is boom bust economics. All right? Grow until you bust and then start again. And it's an all or nothing attitude of the boomers, which the millennials latched onto. Because you've got to remember, socialism is the means of control of production. Socialism is the CEOs. It is not overthrowing the capitalist. It is becoming the only capitalist. I've tried to educate people on this, but my videos only get small views. And I want to focus my time and energy on what at least is growing and get my ideas out there so people understand that you've been lied to about economics. I studied economics. It's all subjective interpretations of human behavior. There are some predictable things. If you do have 10,000 different shoes, right? And you only select and you own and control a few styles, you can get more money for those few good styles than you can for your average ordinary flat, which anybody can make. The problem is you still have people getting $400 for boots that people can mass produce for less than $20 because of perceived value, because of the arrogance of the customer. Those things you cannot quantify in economics. There's no policy that you can create in government that creates that sort of moron consumer. It's a long, slow climb in which you have a cartel of people who are willing to manipulate public perception for money. These multi-million-dollar brands are a result of public manipulation by media, government, corporations, all working hand in hand. That is fascism. Thus, you have the European fashion industry is fascist. Outsiders who create any brand are immediately devalued, no matter what they produce, or no matter how good their production. And that is one reason why Ukraine is in such a mess. Because Ukraine became the pariah of the Soviet Union. So its perceived value kept falling. There's no way to measure or change Ukraine's directory, whether it is a simple economic fact that the supplier has to be worth less than the retailer, right? I have to supply to you at a lower cost than you can sell it for. Now, China is pushing ahead with the direct to consumer model. That means getting rid of retail stores, brand name stores, and brand names. Brands in China are now Alibaba, Yimi, and other Temu. They're like Amazon. They're all like Amazon. So, Wildberries is a threat to that economic model. So they get their European partners to intensify the war in Ukraine. They get their Ukrainian assets to target Wildberries. You think China didn't pour billions of dollars into Ukraine influence campaigns to not have assets in Ukraine to still, even today, same in the West, assets who will influence policy and direction of economic policy? Trump is fighting a war on three fronts. He's fighting the American left, the European left, and China. And in the American left is you're a Putin puppet. Funny they don't mention Winnie the Pooh now, don't they? So as you look around the map, you see the same targets hit over and over again, because Russia knows where and Ukraine plays a shell game. They don't tell you what's hit, and Ukraine spreads it out in a direct consumer model, because you can have 100 people assembling 100 drones at 100 points. But because you need explosives, on the other hand, you don't want to spread them around, particularly in an angry populace where theft is rife. A few drones go missing, that's $30. Couple of bricks of explosives, on the other hand, whoa, that's a threat to the security of the state. Now, how free was America? Once upon a time, you could walk into a general store and buy a stick of dynamite. That was freedom. A freedom that even today barely is a fragment of people's memory. So, you think you know freedom? Ha! Play Red Dead Redemption and see what you can do. And then suddenly realize, holy shit, you're right. All the stuff you could just go and buy in a general store. Buy a gun without a license. And people are going to say, but the world's a safer place. Really? Is it? Define safe. All right, so we do have a little bit of growth here in the buffer zone. And, well, you can see there Russia's randomly hitting places, but that randomness is to keep the Ukrainians offset, unsettled, unpredictable, so they can't rally their resources ahead of time. So they'll hit Sumy and then do this dance. They don't want to take Sumy. They don't want to be an occupier. An occupier costs time and money. An occupier is just another failed state in another couple of years. No, they don't want to bear responsibility for Ukraine. They don't want to conquer Europe. Those are all boomer paranoia to justify their war. And as you constantly heard up until recently, I'm a boomer, so I've heard it all my life. Make love, not war. The left always say, use your words, and might doesn't make right. But then came the millennial, the 2000s, right? Straight out of university with completely inverted morals. Because the new fascist left, the marriage of Chinese communism and European liberalism created the new neo-colonial fascist, which satisfied the politics of India, South America, and Africa, which are the primary targets for Chinese takeover. So they created this new pseudo one-size-fits-all, and Venezuela was their socialist liberal, turning a liberal democracy into a fascist state. Only you don't call it a fascist state, you call it socialist. But what is a fascist? Fascist is post-Marx socialism. Now, as you can see, there's been quite a growth in the buffer zone, but the Russian breakout here to take on the Ukrainians, mostly comes at the cost of growth in other areas. And so it is slowing down the war. Some of these growth points is slowing down the war. Do they want Kupiansk? Or do they want it as a killing field? Well, Russia had, when the Ukrainians collapsed and withdrew from Kupiansk, they did hand it mostly over to Russia, but they weren't able to hold it because numbers, right? Ukrainians lured Russia into a trap and had managed to bring out of the forest lots of numbers through being able to rapidly deploy men in convoys of armored vehicles, which is why Russia is targeting vehicles to destroy Ukraine's rapid deployment abilities. Now here seems to be just one bit, no urgent push. There are other priorities, and right now Lyman is one of them. And you can see Lyman and the Mykolaiv was it assault? Siege? Yeah, well, it was gearing up to be a siege, and it's turned into an assault. Control here of the Cross River. As I said, the Russians can now come up both sides, and basically, if they cut this off and start controlling this corridor, and it's not much of a corridor, but they'll turn, and it has already turned into a battlefield, but that will cut off Luka, and Russians will have to start to control the river. 3,000 to 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers are now at risk of becoming POWs within the next 2 to 3 months, or killed if they refuse to lay down arms while this siege continues. This siege, there will be, once they take this, they'll go for this. And again, and start putting this at risk. Why? Because that will mean Lyman and tens of thousands of Ukrainians being cut off from supplies. But of course you're going to say, what about the northern roads? Exactly, that's cut off here, and they'll push through to cut off here. So huge victory. But it's like Operation Market Garden. Too big to fail, right? Oh wait, it did. So yes, there's always the chance that this operation will fail, this operation will fail, this operation may not go how, but you can see the unfolding battlefield, right? Russia loves the flank to reduce casualties and keep this war at a low intensity. And I know people are going to say 1,000 a week is not low intensity. Really? How many people died in 10,000 airstrikes in one night in Iran? So yes, this is low intensity. Russia's all but taken this. They had controlled the area before, but they're retaking territory while holding back the Ukrainians here and here. And that's what the Russians do. They bog you down and attack you from another point. Now do you get why China is bogging you down in Iran, bogging you down in Ukraine, while attacking from Yemen? Bogging you down because China can fight asymmetric wars as often and as long as they want, because they can just print money and give low-cost weapons to nut jobs, and you won't decimate or genocide the enemy. You won't, yeah. So you will allow that, and at times you'll even feed them, naively thinking, oh, they'll become one of us. Yeah, the liberal establishment is based on a false indoctrination. A very oversimplified version of Christianity. Why? Because believe it or not, most academics are low IQ. The problem is you've been led to believe that IQ is how much they can parrot, how much they can recall. Yet they can't even put together the most basic AI and can be replaced by one, because Wikipedia replaced Encyclopedia, and Encyclopedia will be replaced by Grokkopedia, and Grokkopedia will be competing with Googlepedia, though we haven't seen Googlepedia yet. Remember, Gemini is effectively Googlepedia. Same with Grok. It is effectively Encyclopedia now. It just doesn't have a research team behind it to help the AI model self-correct. Now, leaving Grok to self-correct on its own might be a long-term advantage. Same with Gemini. Now, taking this following here, it's just to all cut this off. To put a second front on here, cut this off, and a few thousand Ukrainians they have to get out, which was the whole point of the cauldron, to minimize casualties. But the Ukrainians, that's why they whip up national frenzy and spent a decade whipping up national frenzy so that they will fight to the death. And now you see why everything I tell you, everything liberals accuse you of doing with nationalism is everything liberals accuse you of doing is a confession. You just have to know where they're doing it and whom they're doing it to. Like black nationalism in Chicago. This is all but taken, and it's only a smaller area. This thrust here hasn't grown by much, but they're on the outskirts of the town, and as it appears, they are setting up a front to go here, because this cut this off, cut this network here at this junction, and that only leaves that as an exit. Then Russia will start squeezing, probably here first, turn that into a cauldron. Now, it depends how the battlefield shapes. If the Ukrainian line, which the Ukrainian line in the squeeze will go down to consolidate their position or perish, and then they'll do the same. Just wear them down, wear them down, wear them down, push them out, like they're doing here, wearing them down, wearing down the infiltrators, pushing them out. These are clearing operations, killing Ukrainian infiltrators. Ukraine is not holding on. They're not vicious street battles. I've shown the videos before. These are primarily led by specialist teams from the FSB to hunt out tunnels and concealed structures throughout Krasnokovia, and they have found these in other parts of Ukraine where there are weapon caches of up to 10 tons. It shows you how long and thoughtful the campaign against Russia has been. the preparation for national defense. Yeah, national defense. Right. That's why Russia saw tank pits being dug facing them, what ramparts facing them. That is not national defense. That's why they don't show. And I don't know why Russia doesn't show them. Mainly, I think, because they blow them up. They destroy them. They bulldoze them. Because anyway, there's no way to prove to you how long or when those ramparts and plus they don't want to reveal their capabilities and espionage and timelines of espionage as well. And ultimately, they also know the majority in the West won't care or believe anyway, no matter what evidence Russia shows. So when you hear the news that they're heading towards Duvhilia, where's this headed? Where's this offensive headed? Told you so. And they are going to squeeze out what's left of the Ukrainians who probably come down the river, probably race down the roads, probably get deliveries airdropped at night by flying drones. And why would they let the drones through? Because the drones give away positions, son. Now this town's all but taken. This is taken. All but taken. And it's the same through here. There are areas where the Russians are bogged down as they continue. But as you can see, in other areas, they're preparing a full-on assault here, taking out satellites, taking out a major logistics hub for the overland. It comes off the rail here, comes up here, and starts spreading out through here on its way to Kursk. As you can see, Kursk is a conglomerate. Now, you might wonder when I pull out, there's so many names still on the map. Each name on that map represents a military governor. Ukrainian army, split into each one, probably 500 to 1,000 Ukrainians. This is so they know where the battles are and could quickly just highlight them on the map. So if there's a battle here, it'll probably, yeah. Now, there are still battles along these lines. They're still pushing through here. Most of this is infiltrated, but has not fallen. The Ukrainians still patrol up through here and trying to maintain, but the Russians are putting more and more pressure, and there's more lines through here, because a lot of them were zigzag through here. Try and protect which way the Russians are coming. And it's difficult, but once they take this out, we'll come up through here. Now they may, as they call it, the cascade effect, and that is when they pivot a 90 degree. Now, they're going to push up through here. As I said, it's more a central thing, cascade out, up and across, up and across. Now, each of the three armies, four of the six, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're doing the bulk of the fighting. This battle group here has killed the most by far. Half the casualties come from these battles here. Koshnikovia on itself is half of the rest. So these battles aren't even as intense as this. This is like half, a quarter. And these other battles account for a quarter. This battle here, 70. They're all little. They're in the low hundreds. Each battle, and but these battles are in the high 100, 200 casualties each. So it shows you the intensity of the war is also spread out like a bell curve. Well, it's almost if, yeah, the war is being fought by mathematical algorithm, yes, and both sides are pitting their not just their intelligence and understanding of with logistics. It is the shortest line. So why are these battles always sloped and angled? Well, it's the human mind. You love straight lines. You love straight lines. That's why battlefield formations are straight lines. You know who's beside you, and your flanks are protected. Here, how do you attack the Russian flank? Attack it here. This pivots, or this. Attack it here. This pivots. This pivots. Try to attack it this way, and it folds into a V. It's the lay of the land. So you always have the thrust, and it pulls up the rest. So you have this thrust, and it pulls up here. It comes like this, and you're attacking. Remember, you're attacking a vertical line. They can only come down. They can't pivot. They pivot from here. They've got to go through these roads. There aren't any other way. They narrowed the options. They're going to march overland. March. You've seen a school. You remember high school trips. See what free buses looks like. Now imagine that with military gear, which takes up twice as much space. So you got twice as many people standing around each bus, loading stuff, making sure it's all packed, all fueled up, everybody's got their gear on, everybody's got at least something. Weapons and ammunition's all crated and stuff like that. No. Packs sitting on people's laps. Some will be travelling with sidearms and a few armed just in case of an ambush. Heck, it is a logistical nightmare. That's why a lot of soldiers' training is about movement, to maximize movement. Now, and that's why this war moves slow, to maximize movement, to maximize efficiency, because you have two low-tier economies that can't afford a mistake. Now I need your support. I am soon launching the Empire Valve's official not suitable for art book. This is illustrations. The first book is Sora the Empress, Cade's wife. Now, this is all based on my books. There she is. Notify. Link in the description below. Get notified on launch. Show your support. Thank you. Now, Wildberries has been attacks on Wildberries has finally been reported in Western media. And they admit Ukraine is trying to destroy it. Now for weeks now, Ukrainian drones have been attacking vast warehouses that are part of Russia's biggest online retailer, Wildberries. They claim this is part of Ukraine's bring it home strategy. To bring the war to Russia, they are attacking civilian infrastructure, civilian power stations, civilian businesses. This company's 99% of their retail What is Wildberries? Well, as I said, 99% of it's retail. The rest of their revenue is wholesale. Not much. Kim was a school teacher, a young mother who founded Wildberries. Her branding and her efficiency soon had other online retailers forming partnerships, and soon she was getting investment to build a infrastructure to support these small businesses. And as their costs decreased, they were able to borrow more and more money and expand rapidly. Forbes estimated Kim's fortune at $8.1 billion US dollars. And all she does is store and ship efficiency, other people's products. These warehouses, does it supply military equipment? It supplies equipment that could be used by the military. Bulletproof vests, not many. Around, out of 12,000 items, maybe half a dozen. It's like Amazon. And we'll get to that later. Okay, so you know what Wildberries is. Now, Ukraine admits that it's attacking Russia's commercial warehouses. This is Ukraine independent, Kyiv independent. Ukraine admits they're attacking it. Energy infrastructure, warehouses and energy infrastructure in the city of Belgrade. It's logistics warehouse. Russian residents showing explosions across the city. They even admit it's belonging to Wildberries. But Zelensky insists that Wildberries is a military contractor supplying military equipment. They say, look, they have military equipment on their website. What? They have drones? Some wannabe camouflage for weekend warriors to, body armor? Stuff that security personnel buy? Security personnel can't buy them like the military can. They have to buy it from a retailer. Russia's military buys from the wholesaler at much, through. Why would they use the markup of Wildberries when they have their own procurement and supply systems? See, that's the problem. People out there want to only equate every experience they have. They don't understand that the majority of people out there don't understand other countries don't operate the same way we do. That's why our militaries cost us so much more, because we are inefficient. Russia, with a smaller economy, has to be more efficient, has to have lower profits, has to have more anti-corruption, and with a smaller, more procurement system, they can keep an eye on each member's bank account, and as soon as the numbers go up, they pull them in and ask why. Where did this $40,000 come from? Oh, I see you bought a new pool. Where did the money come from? They question their people so fiercely. Why? Because the corruption of the Soviet Union was that bad. I swear, up until, I think Boris Yeltsin was probably the first Russian president in a long time to be who's probably the least corrupt Russian president, with Stalin being the most. Up until Yeltsin, right? And pretty much it's been the same way ever since. Now, massive. You may see white walls with gold color on the walls of the Kremlin. That's paint. That doesn't mean Putin's living like a millionaire. It means he lives in a mansion that looks and feels like $1 billion. So you've been deceived. Your mind's perceived value is deceiving you. and you're letting the mainstream media control you. Now, the massive drone attack on Belgrade is reported from the Russian side as an attack on civilians. You make up your mind. You can look up, if you want, and see Belgrade isn't a military town. There is a military base near there out of necessity for air defense. Russian forces have retaliated, and they will again tomorrow. They've used ground 4. These are Seeker drones. These are AA-powered, jet-engined drones. They're not Shihad. Most of the Shihads are being actually sold back to Iran, which is why Trump told Russia to cut it out. But objective monitoring of cargo ships. So they try to make sure they only hit military targets. 2 tugboats were moored at the pier at the time. This is, there you go, interceptors. Kyiv was holding a military display, and Russia attacked it. Yeah, that's what they do. They attack military targets because the efficiency of the Russian mind is to destroy the military targets, because Russians know destroying civilian targets only hardens people against you. But because their aim is to destroy the Russian economy, yes, they'll attack the largest retailer in Russia. Why? Because they're bigger than the Europeans. The Europeans are jealous. They're petty and jealous. And it's also to make sure that China and their European partners can cover up Russia. That's why it's so important. Illegal. That's why it's so important. But Americans are so indoctrinated into believing we must protect the First Amendment above all. And that's why your country's in a mess, because you don't protect the country and the Constitution as a whole. You only protect selectively. You always have to protect the whole. You are being manipulated by liberals yet again. Now, Russian forces continue to carry out group strikes overnight. That means the attacks started a few hours ago and have not stopped. Sputnik did update this a short time ago. I'm not going to follow them on. When I started this, it was updated 6 months ago. So when I started this recording, and the new commander-in-chief, Kremlin has vowed a direct threat to carry out some sort of retaliation, believing the Ukrainian commander-in-chief is a racist, a Russophobe, that the leadership of Kyiv commits racism and xenophobic behaviour and nationalistic rhetorics prohibited under the International Convention against the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. In other words, Europe does not stand by European values when it comes to... Why? Because hypocrisy is a tool of war, just like asymmetric war. Asymmetric war, as far as I'm concerned, if a foreigner commits rape, he should be put to death, because that is an asymmetric weapon of war. But Europe says, no, you're going to prove that he's the enemy. He's a foreigner. That's all you need to know. Bang. See, so many liberals out there, they always overcomplicate everything when they want to defend their fellow insurrectionists, but they always want to oversimplify when they want to attack you, because they consider you the reactionary, and that the reactionary is the greatest sin in the eyes of the Marxist. They are not liberals, they are Marxists, but I say liberal because the majority out there still has not caught on that the liberalism is a mental illness that leads to the cancer of Marxism. Stage 4 cancer is Marxism. We're in stage 3, the liberal elitism. They have a sprinkling of socialists and Marxists, but the majority of them are nothing more than youthful idiots. Stage 3 cancer. No, if you're into biblical prophecy, it's the dragon who's the enemy. And who represents the dragon? Not China. No, China, no. Actually, it does. It's not Russia. Russia's the bear. And it's always been the bear. The two greatest threats to European homogeny was America and Russia. The socialist revolution was supposed to destroy Russia. It didn't. Instead, it created imperialist China, reinvigorated imperialist China with the civil wars in China, which China loves to blame on foreign intervention, but actually the foreign intervention was actually to try and put a stop to. The Europeans did not occupy China to take over. They were there to stop the wars from the communists, to allow the free flow of trade to continue. Just like America now is trying to stop Iran from attacking its neighbours to allow the free flow of trade to continue. That is liberalism. The protection of trade, the protection of property rights, the protection of the individual over the entities. Entities that are antithetical to the freedom of humanity. That is, though sometimes necessary for the state, private militias, warlords, insurrectionists, revolutionaries. Unfortunately, because liberals always simplify everything, they classified the boxers as the enemy and failed to deal with the real enemy, the festering communist, because they saw the opportunity to have a leverage against China. The European fascist is the enemy. They're antithetical to freedom. They keep talking about free speech and then saying, no, but there's provisos and rules that you must obey, and that you must live in these little hamlets, and you can only live in your hamlet, and we must maximize the efficiency of the economy, so you are the baker's son, you will grow up to be the baker. This is feudalism. Fascism is feudalism. It's which is just another collective, right? It's a brand. Liberalism, socialism, communism, the left, they are all brands, okay? They all lead to the same thing. You with a boot on your neck. If you're not a liberal, if you don't have a PhD, there's no way you're the elite of the academia. If you're not an actor or an actress, A-list or even S-tier, then forget it. You're a useful idiot to them, okay? They are not. If you're even a millionaire, you have money that belongs to us. That is the attitude of the WEF. If you're not in the club, then you are a victim. So why support the club? Why support the club? Why do you support actors and actresses? They don't support you. They look down on you. Right? They are the nobility of old. They are the class that America tried to cut out, the aristocrat. And it is born out of French aristocracy. And you can see a lot of actors and actresses traced to Hungarian and other aristocracies across Europe who were under the Habsburgs, subverted by the Kazakhs, who married into a lot of these noble families. While the Kazakh men were rather ugly and brutal beasts, they produced very beautiful women who they married off to European nobility through the Habsburgs and Masidi. So you have a whole new view of the world, I hope, and actually understand that asymmetric warfare is the biggest threat to the world right now, and that proxy wars such as Ukraine are a thing of the past and should be put to rest. And the we need a new politic. Liberalism has failed. It is a disease, a cancer. It is not a self-correcting system. So, whoops, I forgot to reset. So thank you all for watching. Yes, this is my second attempt at recording. I had a crash. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.